Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, we were talking about what we're going to do shows about today, and it was like, oh, fall camp opens in less than a week. We are less than a week from the start of Ohio State fall football practice. Uh, I mean, it was literally the craziest summer in the history of college football, and continues to be the craziest summer in the history of college football. But it was like, well, we were real busy, but the good news is it made the offseason go real quickly, didn't it?
It did. And now that we've had no time there's been no build up for camp. I know in the past we've done this week it's linebacker preview, next week it's defensive line, and the week after that it's cornerbacks. And it's like, we've got camp coming, so we better cram a bunch of stuff together and preview what you're going to see or what you're going to hear about. I don't know how much seeing there's going to be. Probably don't expect a lot because it's fall camp. And even though everybody is so happy to be back and coaches are so happy to have the media back and all of this, they're only so glad to have us back.
Yeah, they were excited to see us in Indianapolis. No one said anything about being excited to see us in Columbus. That's very different. But they were, you get us on the field in Indianapolis, yeah, absolutely. It's great to see you guys. We'll talk to you again in November. See you guys. Bye. See you the next time we're back here. Bye.
Exactly. So what we thought we would do, Tom and I are just going to go back and forth. 10 things we're looking forward to seeing, or 10 things we're looking for on offense in camp. And then the next show will be 10 things on defense. Very easy to follow along, even easier to plan. I'm not saying that's why we're doing this, but it might be. So let's talk offense, where there's a bunch of stuff to, as I put my list together, I found myself, there's a lot more things on defense, I think.
Correct. Yes.
So, but we'll start with offense first. And Tom, if you would like to go first, I will go ahead and let you.
That is very nice of you to allow me to take the starting quarterback. Who is the starting quarterback for the 2021 Ohio State Buckeyes? I think that seems like a fairly significant question. I think we are probably, I don't think you have to read too far between the lines to figure out, based on previous shows, who Tony and I are both leaning towards as the very likely quarterback for the 2021 Ohio State Buckeyes. But Ryan Day said no decision's been made. They're going to look at it. They want to have a decision 1 to 2 weeks into fall camp. Ideally, you kind of, because you don't want to do the 2015 thing where you're standing on the sideline in Blacksburg and it's like, so who's going to go on the field, guys? You don't want to do that. You want to have a decision made earlier than that. So then, this is a first-time starter. That guy can sort of take his role as, a team leader in some form or another, not necessarily a captain, but a leadership role within the team. Again, you're getting more of the practice reps at that point. You've got a lot of work to do. So yeah, I am very interested to see, if you and I are correct, and in fact, CJ Stroud will be the starting quarterback of the 2021 Ohio State Buckeyes.
And not everybody, most people are expecting that to happen. So I'm like, what if there actually is a quarterback competition? What if Ryan Day can't name a starter until the final week? That would be pretty amazing as well if he declines to name a starter 2 weeks in, when you got to start game planning and getting that guy the 70% of the reps instead of 40% of the reps or 35% of the reps. Eventually he's got to ramp it up. And so I'm wondering, what happens if that doesn't happen as quickly as Ryan Day wants. Then we will all be like, oh, well, there is actually a quarterback competition. This is refreshing. I like the honesty from the head coach for once. This is nice.
I can't even imagine the content explosion of August if we have Big Ten conference realignment and an Ohio State quarterback derby really raging full bore all at the same time. I don't know if the people could take all of the content. I don't know if I could take all of the takes if that those two things are happening at the same time. But as someone who hosts a daily morning show, I'm not going to say no to any of it.
The only thing missing would be JT Tuimoloau announcing his decision on August 3rd or 12th or something like that. But unfortunately, he's already in Ohio State. He'll be taking part in camp, unfortunately. Mine, Tom, my first one, I'm interested to hear the feedback because, again, I don't know that we're going to see much. I'm interested to hear about the feedback regarding Master Teague. Where is he in terms of his recovery? Is he fully back to being what he was before? Is that that Achilles no longer an issue like we kind of think it was last year, knowing he's not the shiftiest guy and knowing that he has worked on his agility. He talked about that last year. So I'm wondering what kind of feedback do we get while knowing the entire time that if people are talking positively about him, the Ohio State fan base and many of us in the media will be like, yeah, okay. I'm no. I totally believe it. I totally buy it. But this is a guy who knows he's being doubted, is a driven person on the field, off the field. He hears it, he sees it, he can't possibly not hear it and see it. And I don't want to say everybody's against him, but I feel like there's a lot of people against him. And does that drive him? Does it defeat him? I don't think it defeats him. So I'm interested to see what his camp looks like, knowing though that if he doesn't have that skill set, then he doesn't have particular skill set. But I just want to hear what the feedback is, knowing that few people will actually buy it.
Really, when you think about this is all Master Teague's fault for not being the shiny new thing. Like this is your fault for enrolling several years ago, and now everyone knows what you are. So you're not the shiny new thing that no one has ever seen do anything wrong. So therefore, I mean, I don't know who else you would blame for that. His parents, maybe, for when he was born. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of blame to go around, safe to say. The running back thing, and we'll transition to the shiny new thing in just a minute. But the running back room on the whole is super interesting to me because you have Teague, who I think would have to be the betting favorite to be the starter for the first game. I don't know that he's the betting favorite to be the starter for the 5th game or the 10th game this year. Mayan Williams is, he is not quite as shiny and new as TreVeyon Henderson, but he's, you look at his numbers for last year and it's like you feel like you saw a lot of Mayan Williams last year. And, there's a little bit of Mandela effect going on with Mayan Williams 2020. It's like, how many carries did he have? I don't know, 40, 50? It was like, what did he hit it with? 9, 8, 9? I mean, it was just, you remember like, oh, there was this great cutback against Clemson. And if he was playing against Clemson, he must have played, nope, like 10 carries. That was it. So yeah, he has the shiny new veneer on him as well. He's certainly going to be in that mix to be, he's getting carries in the first quarter against Minnesota if he's healthy for sure. But, my next one is the shiny new thing. What's TreVeyon Henderson's role in this whole team? Because everyone you talk to, all the insider reports that we get from Nevada, all the insider, all the people you talk to inside the program, it's just like, yep, this kid's the real deal. Like it is coming quickly. And it's just, is TreVeyon Henderson someone who gets into the rotation halfway through and he's kind of the third back right now and he's just getting the second half kind of carries and to start the season? Can he earn his way into first half carries? I think I've said before I expect him to get like second quarter carries against Minnesota. Can he earn his way into first quarter carries against Minnesota? Can he have, is he going to have 2 carries before halftime of that game, or is he going to have 12 carries before halftime of that game? A lot of that's going to be determined in the next month. And we have seen J.K. Dobbins in 2017, obviously not nearly as deep a running back room at that point, but we have seen J.K. Dobbins have 29 carries in the season opener against Indiana and 170 something yards, 180 something yards. I mean, you have seen true freshmen do this. TreVeyon Henderson certainly has the pedigree to do this. I think I'm real intrigued to see, what can he do this month to earn the right to show that to you as early as possible and as often as possible very early in the season.
We didn't have to wait long to hear about J.K. Dobbins, be it in the spring or especially in the fall. So I agree. I wonder how quickly we hear about movements being made, and does he surpass the Mayan Steen bear? Is that Mayan Steen? Mayan Steen.
What's funny is that's another one of the Mandela effect things that you see. Everyone remembers it the Berenstain Bears. It's actually the Berenstain Bears. That's one of the very commonly cited Mandela. This is the Mandela effect episode of Buckeye Weekly. We spent the whole time talking about Michigan. You just don't remember that.
Did you ever see the movie where Mayan Williams is a genie?
Yes, with Shaq. Yes.
Correct.
Yes. Correct. Mm-hmm.
So yes, yeah. I'm interested to see just how quickly there is like, oh, this is the guy. Like there's, and I love hearing it from the players. And it sounds like this year we're going to get more players to talk to because the OSU Sports Information Department is going to like try not to hold anybody back from exploiting their own names if that's a self-exploitation type of thing. So we're hopefully going to get to talk to more people about more people. Do you have something to add, Tom?
I believe it's called capitalizing upon and not exploiting. I don't think you can exploit yourself. That's there's an element of agency there, but go on.
So I'm interested to see how quickly that happens. My second one, even though I've had both of yours listed, you took quarterback and running back. I mean, come on. I'm going to go receivers, and specifically, will Julian Fleming, Emeka Egbuka, Marvin Harrison play well enough in camp to ensure the 6-man rotation that we're always talking about? And we know that's what Ohio State wants to get to. So will the receivers follow suit? I believe Julian Fleming will do just fine to bring out this, at least a 4-man rotation. And I'm not going to sit here and doubt Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison based on anything I've seen from either of them. But we have seen, go back to Austin Mack as a true freshman, was outstanding as in the spring, kind of hit a wall and fall. So would it be a shock if one of the freshmen hits a wall this fall camp? I don't think so. Now things are spread out pretty far, and there are no 2-a-days anymore, and there's only so many padded practices. So things are a little bit easier. So does that mean they hit the wall in October or something like that? Maybe, but I just want to see, will those three, and again, I think Julian Fleming is going to be fine. He's going to play. The only problem he has is he's the number 2 Z to Chris Olave, likely. So right there, you're already limiting yourself. But, can Egbuka and Harrison, they're true freshmen. We know that. Can they be relied upon? Because if it's a 6-man rotation, that's essentially 6 starters. That's asking a lot for true freshmen to be starters. So maybe it's one of those things where they get eased in like Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson have in the past.
Yeah, I had them on my list as well. Those 3 guys in that exact order. So we must be onto something there. But yeah, I think this is, the nice thing for those guys is there's not a ton of pressure on them. They're not in that J.K. Dobbins 2017 mode where it's like, well, Mike Weber tore his hamstring and the only other guy on the roster is Antonio Williams. So hope you're ready because you're going in. These guys have the luxury of even Fleming, who, this is not his first year, but he had the shoulder injury last year. So you're really kind of, this is really his first kind of full year. I think the fact that you have the luxury of Olave and Wilson and Jackson Smith and Jigba ahead of you, that takes a lot of that pressure off where, they're not necessarily guys who are going to be asked to go in and be in the red zone in the first quarter of the first game. Like you have other guys ahead of you where you're comfortable. And you can, that gives you the opportunity to kind of work your way up to where you are. Because I do think, I don't expect both of those guys, the two true freshmen to just put up, like a combined 8 catches or something like that this year. I mean, they're going to put up numbers, but also they don't have to put up numbers. If only one of them has a good season, and the other one is, does hit that wall like you talked about, that's okay. They have plenty of other depth there. But, based on what we saw from Emeka Egbuka in the spring game, based upon what we saw from Marvin Harrison and what we heard about Marvin Harrison throughout the spring and the summer, I'm expecting pretty big things. And Julian Fleming was the number 1 overall receiver in his class in 2020. So there's some expectation there. But for guys who have had a lot of hype, there's not as much pressure because you're not necessarily being they don't have to have those 3 guys all perform at an elite level very early in the year. They've got the luxury of having enough depth there that they can come along as they do. I mean, you remember Chris Olave. Chris Olave was basically nothing until late October, early November of 2018. It was, time waits for no man. It has been a minute. But yeah, 2018, Chris Olave, we've told the story before, but they brought a Chris Olave out for interviews in late October. And so everyone writes their Chris Olave profile and all the comments are, who cares about this scrub? This is, and then he has a good game against Michigan State. And then he has 2 touchdowns in the first half against Michigan. And it's like, okay. Now I care about this scrub. Okay. If it takes half a season for these guys to really get ramped up and to be ready to be contributors, that's okay. That does not mean those guys are busts. That's okay. For my next one, I'm circling back because this is a separate thing to me. Who is the backup quarterback this year? Who is number 2 on the depth chart? Now, this is not quite as high on my list, I think this is almost more of an intriguing question to me, but it's not quite as high on my list because I don't know that we're necessarily going to get the answer to this question. I think the chances of the depth chart reading CJ Stroud, first team, Jack Miller, or Kyle McCord, second team, for the game one, I think is probably about 97%, because I don't think they're going to want to name a number 2 quarterback, definitively there. But who's getting the second reps when we are watching them go through warmups at Minnesota at the newly named Huntington Bank Stadium? Who are we going to actually be seeing repping second behind CJ Stroud during those warmups? That to me is real interesting, because you sort of would default to Jack Miller because he's had an extra year of experience, but man, Kyle McCord is real talented. And if last year there was the who's just, Jack and CJ are both kind of right behind. But when Justin Fields got hurt against Clemson, there was no question who was coming into the game. Like, no question at all who's coming into the game. And, who was the second guy off the bench after Justin Fields in Michigan State? CJ Stroud. Like, it was just, so if CJ Stroud is unable to play at some point during the Minnesota game, who's that next guy? Because, the depth chart can say one or the other, but deep down in their hearts, they know who that next person is. I'm really interested to see who that person is.
Yeah, and last year, we all thought it was CJ Stroud, and the first quarterback off the bench was Jack Miller. So I could see something where the backup for the second team warm-up quarterback at Minnesota is Jack Miller because he has the experience. The next week, I could see it being Kyle McCord, and it becomes this thing where, oh, no, it's a weekly thing, just like Ryan Day said this year with CJ Stroud and Jack Miller. Backup is always a weekly thing. It just depends on how good you practice that week. And so there's no definitive backup. And then, of course, whenever it's time for the backup to come in, outside of that first outing last year, it was always CJ Stroud. So that's how that's when you really know who the backup is. And so I guess the hope is from Ryan Day, he's never put in that position to where, okay, now we actually need the backup. And so if he can just continue to alternate them, he's probably going to be happy with that.
Yes, but when you go back to 2017 and Joe Burrow breaks his hand during preseason camp, and then Dwayne Haskins enters the season as the backup, you never really, Joe Burrow never really got another chance to catch up with Dwayne Haskins at that point. I mean, we've talked about that in the past as well. If someone does enter the season as the clear-cut number 2, then that's it. You're not going to do the carousel of backup quarterbacks thing. So, and I think at some point that's going to become clear. Like, it's either going to be one or the other. And, you once you get partway through the season, I don't know that you necessarily need to, if you do have a clear-cut guy, you don't necessarily need to keep up the charade, because once it's mid-October, the guy's not going to transfer necessarily in the middle of the season. So that's less of a concern. So I do expect there to be a clear-cut number 2 at some point during the fall. But you're right. It could take a couple weeks for that to sort of get sorted out.
My next one is not all of that. It's not that sexy. It's not that high up on the list of what many people are looking for. I will be wondering if Luke Whippler takes any snaps at left guard, or is he strictly a center? And if he is, then you've got the whole Harry Miller thing in there. But if he can play left guard, now you are competing. He's competing against Matt Jones for that starting spot, maybe a couple of other guys in there as well. But I don't know if is he only a center. We've only, I think, ever seen him at center. So if he's getting a look at left guard, that tells me we want to see if can he handle it? Can he be one of the best 5? And it also says Harry Miller, no matter what, is our center. That's kind of also where I would lead with that. Even though Ryan Day said all of that stuff is still going to have to figure itself out, he didn't say Harry Miller is a center. There's still some work to be done there. So, there's no reason to hide that. So the fact that Ryan Day isn't saying Harry Miller is a center, to me tells me it's still all up in the air. He mentioned Matt Jones can look good for 10 snaps, all Big Ten good, and then be inconsistent for 10 snaps. So he needs to get that consistency back or going. But if Luke Whippler takes any snaps left guard, that would be intriguing to me. And then open up a whole new factor of, now we got to think about this guy here. And now, just what does it mean for Harry Miller? What does it mean for Matt Jones? Is Matt Jones now a possibility at center? and Luke Whippler a possibility at guard, and there's any number of worms in that can that can be discussed. If just this little one, just this one weird trick.
Yeah, and I had my one weird trick is Harry Miller a guard or a center? That's it's a related question, obviously, but I do feel like if you answer that question, if you have the answer to that question, you have a lot of the other pieces start to fall into place, or at least fall into certain buckets. And it's like, well, okay, now left guard is either this guy or this guy. And right guard is, I think we're probably pretty confident that right guard is going to be Paris Johnson. But, you get that one piece in place. Is Harry Miller a left guard? Well, that tells me that the center battle is these two guys. And if Harry Miller's a center, tells me the left guard battle is these 2 to 3 to maybe 4 guys, depending on who you want to include in that battle. But yeah, I think this all goes back to the philosophy they've pretty much always had, which is 5 best guys. Figure out the 5 best guys, and then you sort them out. Like who are the 5 guys that give them the best opportunity to win games and dominate along the line of scrimmage, and then you'll put those guys into places. That was you go back a couple of years and it was always well, Brandon Bowen, well, he could be a starter at any of 4 spots on the offensive line. He could slide into either guard spot. He could slide it into either tackle spot. And, it always seemed, when he was healthy, when he hadn't broken his leg, it always seemed like he was somewhere in that 5. And it was just, he's one of the best 5. And then they'll sort of figure it out from there. This year, there's not a lot of intrigue at the tackle spots. There's not a lot of intrigue probably at the right guard spot, but center and left guard, where is Harry Miller? And that answers, that definitively answers one question, and it goes a long way to sort of starting to answer the other one.
And who knows, does Josh Fryer get involved at left guard? They love him. It all becomes sort of like the offensive line Sudoku, where, certain things slot in here and you've got some spaces here and you're like, wow, is that a 4? Is that a 7? Something like that, where it eventually sorts itself out, but you kind of need some other answers along the way. One of my favorite things in my next thing is when somebody gets asked, or somebody asks, hey, there's a game today, who's starting? And it doesn't matter what the spot is. It's like, hey, three practices in, no pads yet, but Ryan, if there's a game today, who's your starter at say running back or whatever? There won't be any definitive answers, but eventually, like say 10 days in, Tony Alford will start answering that. Brian Hartline will start answering that. And then I want to know 20 days in, do the answers change? So has there been somebody make a move where, hey, 2 weeks ago we asked you said Master Teague would be starting. And so if there's a game today on this random Wednesday, who would be starting? And if there's a little Mayan Williams has had a really good camp, or Marcus Crowley has done this, or, it's going to be really hard to keep TreVeyon Henderson off the field. I'm just looking forward. I'm looking to see, is anybody making a move? Has anybody changed a coach's mind? And really, because a coach has to be confident enough in a person to say, yeah, he's my starter, because they don't always do that. They won't necessarily give you a starter. So it would take such a thing where you've got a player who has gained the coach's confidence, like, yeah, he'd be my starter today. And then a week or two later, for the coach to gain so much confidence in somebody else to say, actually, he's my starter now. And all the while, we understand everybody's going to play, but there's a reason starters are so important, and that's why we talk about them. And so there's a legacy. There's I don't want to say stigma, whatever the good stigma is that goes with that, with being a starter, just to see if there's any change. And because I think change is a good thing, and it drives everybody.
It does. And I think there's a lot to be learned from that kind of stuff. I mean, this is when we talk about reading the tea leaves with coaches, that's the kind of stuff we're talking about, where it's like, you don't necessarily get a complete, they're not going to spit out a depth chart at you, but you talk to them long enough, you can sort of pick up some trends and pick up some, either certain guys are always getting talked about by all the different coaches, or, noticeable changes in the trends with certain guys or certain position groups. That's, I think, all, very, very useful information. It's a little bit, it's a little bit inside baseball, obviously, but that's the kind of stuff that, that is how we get you the answers to the questions that you have. You're not necessarily interested in the really, really, the real minutia of all of that stuff, but that's how we get you the answers that you actually want to know. So that's that is an important part of it as well. I'm going to kind of cheat on my last one because I'm kind of jumping to. I had another one on the offensive line, but I think I'm going to cheat and I'm going to jump to kickers instead. Who is the starting kicker on this team? Like, who is the first person who's trotting out to kick a 42-yard field goal in that Minnesota game? Because Jake Seibert is the semi-incumbent. Obviously, last year was Blake Haubeil, so Seibert filled in when Haubeil was dinged up at the end of the year. He missed a couple field goals in the spring game. They bring in Noah Ruggles from North Carolina. You have Dominic Camacho, who is kicking for kickoffs probably, or was at least last year. But who is it that actually comes out and wins that starting job to kick that first 40-yard field goal of the season? Because, Ryan Day was asked about Ruggles when we were in Indianapolis, and he kind of said, well, we had an open scholarship spot, so you bring him in and just kind of, you always know there's going to be a game that comes down to a kick, or you always feel like there's going to be a game that comes down to a kick. So you might as well, we have an open scholarship, might as well bring in a guy to, give us the best chance to make that kick in whatever that crucial situation is. So that's going to be a real interesting situation to keep an eye on this fall heading into camp.
Over the years, having two kickers, similar to if you've got two quarterbacks, you don't have one. If you got two kickers, you don't have one. Like you go back to 2001 with Josh Houston and Mike Nugent, where they were both bad. And I don't know that either of them, that competition helped either of them. Eventually things got fine. You go back to Aaron Petrie and Ryan Pretorius, where they were fine together, and Nurnberger. And every time they'd bring in somebody to kind of replace him, and he did okay. And the thing is, you can have your kickoff specialist, you can have your placement specialist, you can have your long kicker. So I guess there are enough roles and responsibilities for two scholarship kickers that one of them doesn't feel neglected and starts to get into their own head and ruin their own psyche about, I'm not good enough for this, or, because kickers are creatures of habit, and sometimes they can be psycho creatures of habit. I've heard stories of past kickers where it's just like, you get the yips and you just forget it. And so there's a danger there in bringing somebody in. But if you feel like you're already in danger, then you better go get some more help. And I don't want to say that that's where Ryan Day was, but it certainly felt like it was worth the risk. And we'll see. It's definitely going to be interesting to watch. Maybe that might be all we get to watch during camp. So I guess we better be paying attention, right?
We always get to watch punt. Come on, we'll get to see Aussie sensation Jesse Mirko whenever we get to watch practice this fall. That's we get to watch stretching, we get to watch punt, and then the question is, how much you get to watch beyond that? And the answer is sometimes not much, but I have tremendous faith that we will get to watch punt this fall. Not a concern at all.
Now, my last one, and we may, if we have some extras, we can go over them. There's some unique and different tight ends in this offense. So let's hear about how are they going to be used? What are their different skill sets? What does it mean for the offense? What can you do differently that you couldn't do before? Is your 12 personnel even different than before? Is it more passing based now? Is it, and they're not going to get too involved. Well, 70% of the time we're in 12, we're going to be throwing the ball, just so you know, in case anybody's wondering. That's what we're going to be doing. But you've got these guys, and Cade Stover, Jeremy Rucker, couldn't say enough good things about him. Oh, Jeremy Rucker, by the way, if given the opportunity, could possibly be the best tight end in the nation. So why not try to get him the ball 40 or 50 times and see what happens there? And then Cade Stover, G. Scott, Joe Royer. You have to mention Mitch Rossi. I mean, a fullback in this Ohio State offense, while it's not typical, but I feel like if you don't mention Mitch Rossi, the rest of the tight ends might get angry with you. And by mentioning Mitch Rossi, like Kevin Wilson will hear like his ears are ringing. He's like, oh, okay. Well, something good just happened. And so we'll mention Mitch Rossi as well. And there's just a number of guys there, and they can do different things. We were concerned about maybe it's going to be less 12 personnel based on you lose Luke Farrell and Jake Hausman, but it seems like things are going well there, and there's just different guys that can use different skill sets, and it would be fun to see. I mean, I think we all would love to see what they can do with G. Scott in the slot or wherever. It doesn't even have to be on the slot. Can he be on the line? And just, I don't want to say force the ball to the tight ends, but make more use of them.
Yeah, and forcing the ball to the tight ends has never been the problem with Ohio State football going back several decades. So that's not generally the big concern. But you're right. The position itself is intriguing because you have such different players there. You've got G. Scott, who's listed 6'3", 210, right on the roster next to Cade Stover, who is 6'4", 255. Like a 45-pound difference in weight. I mean, that's like having a 180-pound back and a 225-pound back. That's Demario McCall and Beanie Wells or something. Like they're in the same position group, but also not. So yeah, it is intriguing to see what they have there, because G. Scott is new to tight end. Cade Stover moved from linebacker / defensive end. Cade Stover's been around the block a little bit, but you've got a second year from Joe Royer now. Joe Royer, looked pretty decent in the spring game. You got Sam Hart coming in as a true freshman. Like there's a lot of intrigue there, and it's this is all kind of like vision casting at this point. There's not a lot of track record there with anyone other than Rucker and Rossi, of course. So look, an angel just got his wings. How about that? I said Mitch Rocky's name on the podcast. Good. There's a lot of possibility there. There's a lot of intrigue there in terms of what these different guys can do. How can all these different parts fit together? And with the young wide receivers in the kind of second tier that we talked about earlier, that, if they're not ready, maybe you do see more 12 personnel early in the season, and then it turns into more, 3 wide receiver stuff later in the year. As they get more comfortable with some of those other guys later in the year. But yeah, that for sure, that was on my list, as well as, and others receiving votes, who is at tight end behind Jeremy Rucker, and what did they do? One of the other guys that I had on my list was Dwan Jones. Like, what is he doing? Where is he repping? Because he's a little bit the Brandon Bowen. I mentioned Brandon Bowen earlier. Like, well, he could be a guard, he could be a tackle, he could be on the left side, he could be on the right side. What's Dwan Jones doing this fall? Like, is he the backup left tackle behind Thayer Munford? Is he competing for the starting right job with Paris Johnson? Like, is he backing up Thayer Munford on the right-hand side because they're projecting Paris Johnson as a starting left tackle next year? Like that, I don't know that Dwan Jones necessarily tells me, I don't know that I'm necessarily expecting Dwan Jones to win a starting job this year, but I feel like where I see Dwan Jones on that depth chart or on that practice field with the second team maybe tells me a bunch of other stuff about what they're looking at for next year, what they're thinking for next year, when you do have Munford and potentially Nick Petit for a move on.
Yeah, if he's not at right tackle or even left tackle, I will be surprised, because they could have done that in the spring, and they didn't. So that would be a surprise. Real quick, back to G. Scott, like they can put him in the slot and move Jackson Smith and Jigba around. He didn't play outside as well. So there's several different things they can do there. But yeah, Dwan Jones, we know he can play guard if need be. The fact that he wasn't doing that in the spring tells me they're looking towards next year, and also him being the third tackle this year, the swing tackle, the guy who comes in as Brandon Bowen always did, but he would only come in at tackle, because I think they like their backup guards just fine, whether it's Josh Pryor or Luke Whippler coming in at center and Harry Miller sliding over or whatever. I think they've got options inside that they can keep him out.
Enoch Vamahi is someone, again, who you've heard really positive things about from Enoch Vamahi, about him, over the spring and the summer. And yeah, I mean, I expect him to be at tackle. If he's at guard, that tells me, they're really making a push to, can he earn a starting job this year? Because if you're at tackle, you're pretty much going to be the backup. But, if you were that swing backup tackle, you saw Brandon Bowen, you saw Josh Alaby had that role a couple of years ago where he was the third tackle, and then all of a sudden, like, ta-da, Thayer Munford's back is acting up, and you're the starter in the Rose Bowl. Like that, the third tackle on the team is a pretty significant spot. They went through 4 tackles a couple of years ago where Nick Petit Frere was the 4th tackle, and then all of a sudden, like, ta-da, you're starting at Northwestern because 2 guys are hurt. That is the thing that can happen. So yeah, that'll just tell me if he still is at tackle, that probably tells me they are feeling really reasonably confident that they are not super concerned about transfer portal. Do you have to give him a chance to try and win a job this year, or is that not as much of a concern? And just, he recognizes he's going to be the third tackle this year and then have an opportunity to win that starting job next year.
In that same vein, I'll be interested to see where Enoch Vamahi is, because he was at tackle in the spring. Now, I think we all view him as a future guard, but maybe he isn't. Where's Donovan Jackson? I think he can play tackle, and he came in as a 5-star guard. So let's see. I think there's a lot to be sorted out, and where somebody is on August 3rd doesn't mean that's where they're going to be on September 3rd. And so we will see. Anything else, Tom, before we wrap this one up?
think we've squeezed about all the juice we have out of the offense. And but yeah, there's, as you said at the top of the show, yeah, I was putting together my list of 10 things on offense and my list of 10 things on defense, and my list of defense was filled up much sooner than the offense was, and it was like, I mean, I probably have more questions that I haven't even asked here yet. So yeah, that'll be another intriguing show. And yes, the next show is a Saturday show. Yes, we are starting to shift into season mode. The 2 shows a week for the off season, which at times was barely sufficient. We probably could have. We did do 3 shows quite a few times during the off season because, as I said, there was a lot to talk about. Now we're really getting into. There's a lot to talk about season. So good news. More Buckeye Weekly for your ears coming very shortly.
Right into your earballs. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for watching. Reminder to check out BuckeyeScoop.com. If you are not yet a member, there's no better time than right now with camp kicking off. Got the barbecue this week. There'll be some behind the scenes stuff there and some tons of info on that big recruiting weekend as well. So check that out. Also YouTube, check us out there, youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. Sign up, or you don't even need to sign up. You're already signed up. Just subscribe and you'll be notified when all of our videos like this and others drop. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and we will talk to you guys later.